Over the weekend, Carlton lost another player, Gerard, and Blues fans must be thinking, what have we done? The club said through the president, Luke Sayers, they're going to launch an investigation into their injury issues and perhaps look at doing some things differently. Nothing can do about ACL. That's just unfortunate.
I'm not sure why they put out that missive based on an ACL. I mean, ACLs happen. They're accidents. It's not something that you can do more stretches or less stretches or more or less of this and that. It's just an unfortunate set of circumstances. And
they have had a lot of injuries over the last couple of years. So the thing that I'm interested in, and just from a purely salary cap point of view, the 6-year, $5 million contract for Williams is not going to work out in their favour. Does it mean because they are paying him that they will lose a couple of players? And we've spoken about De Koning and the stretch on the salary cap. Curnow signed 7 years. Mackay signed 7 years. Cripps has signed a long-term deal. Chera, George Hewitt, Adam Sard, Blake Acres have all signed big deals. So that the squeeze is on at Carlton, and it's not a great position to be in because when the squeeze is on when you haven't achieved anything, it's the worst possible scenario that you can be in. Now, I understand Richmond. Damien Hardwick's won 3. So let's try and milk another one. Let's get 4 and put us into football immortality and let's go and get Hopper and Taranto and let's just put it all out there. Spend every single dollar we've got. Give them 7-year contracts. I don't care. I want one more premiership. It's a different scenario at Carlton. So the flow-on effect from this will be interesting to see how that plays out over the next 12 to 24 months.
It is a real challenge when you're trying to get yourself out of the bottom 9 teams, if you like, where Carlton have been ensconced for a long period of time. You don't want to lose those players that can take you to the promised land, but if you pay them too much or you drag people in from other clubs and pay them too much, and all of a sudden when you get to Carlton's position now where they've got some good young talent coming through, it can impact. So it's going to take some self-sacrifice from some of the players. I mean, we hear what they're paid and then we know what they're paid, and sometimes there's differences. And it's going to take self-sacrifice from those who are there, the younger players, to try and build something together. And I think Geelong would appear to have done it as well as Hawthorn did it back in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Blues fans, your thoughts on that? I saw a couple of you shattered on social media over the weekend, and of course our thoughts to Zach Williams, who was pretty positive on his social media, and we'll use the resilience that he's had to have over the last couple of years to rebuild, supported by the club and his teammates. Let's get to our next guest because he is all over everything that is happening in Perth, and there's been plenty of that in the sporting landscape over the weekend. I mean, even their baseball team was in the final. They didn't win, but another couple of teams had good weekends. His name is Ryan Daniels from Channel 7. Rhino, thanks for joining us.
G'day, Kane. G'day, Gerard. Yeah, we're very successful over here, guys. You should know that by now. We just win stuff all the time.
I thought there was going to be egg on your face, though, because of the back page story, I think it was, on the West Australian, that the Perth Scorchers up against a whole heap of nobodies, and that was looking a bit nerve-wracking halfway through the run chase.
I tell you what, that was nerve-wracking. And also, I made a blue last week. I've tweeted out something along the lines of tickets will be available on Ticketmaster for Saturday's final between the Scorchers and the Sixers, completely leaving the Heat out of the equation by accident. And do you reckon the Heat fans, I didn't know there was that many Brisbane Heat fans out there, that I got absolutely murdered for it. So I was breathing a sigh of relief too. Me and the editor of the West, I reckon, were the two most relieved people in WA.
It certainly got tight. It looked until probably the last 2 overs as if it could have gone the other way.
Oh, yeah. And look, that's the Scorchers. I mean, if anyone who's watched them over the past 12 years, yes, they win a lot, but they do it in dramatic fashion. It's often chasing, monster totals like they had to do on Saturday night, or it's, having to defend a minor total and still somehow pulling it off. So they just have a knack of turning up in the big moments, and it's not always... well, the thing about the Scorchers is they don't have big names. I mean, you might say Mitch Marshes, but he hasn't played all season.
Yep.
They've had sort of decent players over the past 12 years, but mainly it's a role team. Yeah, it's mainly role stuff, which has been the really impressive part.
And they love it, like 53,000. I mean, they are one state that gets behind the BBL, and it's revitalised it in a bit of a way, hasn't it? I mean, there was criticism about the competition as a whole leading in, but the Scorchers' success is sort of put a different lens on it.
Yeah, I think, I don't know about you, but I feel like in the last maybe 6 months, BBL's really come from no. Look, it was sort of slowly dying. I think we were losing a lot of that impact. Maybe the season was going on too long. I've enjoyed this season thoroughly, and not just because Perth have been good, but I mean they're always good. So I think there's been genuine moments where it's controlled the sporting landscape for a day here, a day there, a week there, and maybe it was because sort of the test calendar wasn't as strong as it normally is. There was no India over summer, there was no England over summer, so maybe that's part of it. But I don't know about you guys, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the crowd was massive. They turned out, they always do over here.
And the Perth Wildcats got through by about as close a margin as you can, by a point I think it was. Tell us about and explain to our audience about the media coverage over the last 12 months in relation to the Wildcats.
Yeah, it's been tough because obviously Hutchie took over the team and they missed the finals for the very first time in 35 years or something ridiculous. I mean, the Wildcats here, there's a great sense of pride attached to them. It's very similar to the Scorchers. They kind of do the right things every time. They prioritise people over talent. That's just what they do. And so for them to miss it last year, the heat really came. And I know Hutchie probably would have felt it too. And to his credit, he turned up to more games this year. He put a fair bit of effort and energy into it. And, he hired a new coach and found some new players. And it's been a pretty good season for the Cats. I still think there was some people with pitchforks ready to march had they not won that game yesterday by the exact margin they needed to win it by. But in general, there's a lot of parochialism attached. There is to West Coast and Freo, but when it comes to the Wildcats and the Scorchers, you're getting the entire state. So it was always going to be a big deal. If I were Hutchie, I'd be sleeping pretty well last night and tonight after scraping in.
Turning your attention to the two local teams in AFL, what's the biggest story rolling around in town at the moment, outside of the Eagles' fitness? Yeah,
well, mate, you've touched on that one. The Eagles' fitness has been a really big one, and it's noticeable. I know, obviously, you, Kane, had a lot to say about that last year, and I think you've probably been proven right in a lot of ways too, and I think Luke Shuey even sort of hinted at that last week with a bit of a smirk. So they look fit. They do. They really do. You go to training, and they look slimmer. They look there's so many numbers on the track. They're big names like Yo and Shuey and Allen, these guys who haven't played much, really look sharp. So I think on the other side of things, I mean, Fremantle, there's a lot of buzz over here. I don't know if you're getting it over there, but these guys are ready. They were so impressive last year. Many didn't really expect them to be as good as they were. They sort of fell apart a little bit towards the end of the season because they're such a young side. But over here, you've got Fifey. He's trained exclusively with the forwards, which is what people have sort of been pushing for a while. They've got a really good, strong young midfield. And Luke Jackson, don't worry about Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson sharing the ruck. This kid is playing everywhere. This kid is playing like a cannonball. You watch him at training, and he's roving half the time.
As a midfielder in the centre bounce with Darcy, together, or
not necessarily centre bounce, Kane, but more around the ground. So if there's a stoppage, say on the wing or at half back or at half forward, he's around the ball with Darcy as well. So I don't know if we'll see any CBA stuff, maybe a little bit. We haven't seen that yet. But what we will see is two of them running around that midfield and just throwing that weight around. Jackson moves like a midfielder. My expectation for him in the next couple of years is still as big as it ever was. I think he could be one of the best players in the AFL within 2 to 3 years. I really do.
So that being said, with the positivity around the Dockers, what's a pass mark? Yep. Is a prelim final a pass mark?
I think so, yeah. Look, I think if you just look at their age, you'd say, look, there's no rush here. But what they achieved last year, and with the guys, they're young guys. If you're looking at Cox and Brayshaw and Sarong and Young. These guys, Darcy, Jackson now as well, those guys are all real professional young guys. They're not these young guys who sort of shot out of the gate and you're like, hey, that's nice. These guys are the hardest working players at the club. They're in the leadership group. I would expect all of them to improve again another 5 to 10%. And then, you've got guys that haven't even scratched the surface yet, like a Heath Chapman, Jai Amos. They've got so much young talent. There's two new blokes, Neil Erasmus and Matt Johnson, who barely played last year. They look like, in most teams, they'd be their sort of best young bright spot midfielder. There's a lot of talent there, and they're well coached and they're well run. So, yes, I think a prelim is probably where they should be aiming to be. I don't know if it'll be bitter disappointment if they don't get it, because I think there's an awareness here that this is going to be a big window. But I reckon internally and externally, the expectation should be they should be in a prelim.
Geelong's going to name its new captain in the next 2 weeks. I suspect defender Tom Stewart will be unveiled as the replacement for AFL and club legend Joel Selwood. Here's Stewart speaking on the Cats' captaincy race last Friday.
I think over the next maybe 2 to 3 weeks we'll have a pretty honest discussion with some people, and obviously it's a process that the club won't take lightly. He did it his way, and if I get a chance I'll do it my way. If the group thinks I'm the man for the job, then I'll take it with both hands and give it everything I got.
The Stewart story is remarkably uplifting. He's one of the competition's most inspirational individual stories. Stewart transformed himself from an undraftable country footballer to a 4-time All-Australian, best and fairest winner, premiership star, and the apparent successor to fill the biggest captaincy shoes in the competition. All that in the space of 10 years. It will remain a mystery why 18 AFL teams, including Geelong, overlooked him for so many years. Recruiting errors don't come more costly than that. He was 24 when he made his debut for the Cats in 2017, and in 6 seasons he's played 126 games, including 17 finals, and he has a 69% win-loss ratio. Stewart's only blemish in those 6 years was the sickening hit on Richmond midfielder Dion Prestia in round 15 last year. It cost him a 4-match suspension. Impressively though, Stewart immediately owned his actions. There's nothing that I can say now to justify my actions on the day, but my immediate response was to make sure that Dion was okay. I reached out to him immediately after the game. He was in good spirits. He understood that there was no malicious intent. It was a poor decision by me. Now that's what good leaders do. Stewart returned in round 20 against the Bulldogs, and he had 22 disposals and 10 marks in another Geelong win. He didn't miss a beat for the rest of last season. He is Geelong's most important player. He plays with courage, flair, speed and composure. His teammates would surely feel calm when he has possession of the ball. They'd feel relaxed with him tossing the coin and addressing the team pre-game as skipper. Only a handful of players have achieved what Stewart has in the space of 6 years, and the 29-year-old is well on his way to becoming an AFL Hall of Famer. Being named captain of the reigning premiers is richly deserved and would add another chapter to this unique and wonderful football story.
Incredible story, Kane, and when you put it as succinctly as that, it just goes to show what a fantastic recruit he was. I think Matthew Scarlett was such a great contributor to that club over many, many years through a multi-premiership era. He has already contributed so greatly, but to then impact so incredibly on the next era coming through by encouraging this young bloke that he was good enough. Don't go back to the bush. There's more to give. They should be putting a statue up for Matthew Scarlett for a multitude of reasons, including that one. They've also got Mark Blitzarves, who seems to have a lot of support down there, and he is also an unusual story, given that he trialled for the Olympics as a 20-year-old and was slightly late to the game, and is now, I think he's about 29 years of age, he becomes a one-time All-Australian in a season where he bamboozled opposition sides with just the role he was playing.
And listening to Ryan Daniels explain how they're using Luke Jackson at
Similar,
Freo, it just sounds like a complete rip-off. And good luck to Freo. I mean, that's smart business. You've got a player that's athletically capable of doing what Blitzarves has done, and to use your very good term, bamboozle the opposition, then why wouldn't you wheel it out? So look,
and then of course you got Paddy Dangerfield.
Yeah.
Now, when
when
Dangerfield was in Adelaide, I think he was anointed as the next captain to come through. He obviously left to go home to Moggs Creek. He'd certainly be captain of Moggs Creek, I think, if they picked a side. But, they've got 3 unbelievable choices. It'll be interesting to see whether they go down your path.
Yep, well, there's no obvious choice. I think all 3 would be capable. I think he's still going to get the same from Dangerfield, regardless whether he's captain or not. Stewart's just, I don't know, he's got that calmness and he just steadies the ship, whereas Blitzarves is thrown a bit more all over the place and might be more difficult to lead from that area. Cats fans, you can join in on the Harcourt's open line if you want to have your say, and send through your favourite footy stories. Like Tom Stewart is certainly one of mine, as you can hear in my voice. So I think it's remarkable what he's been able to achieve. What are your favourites? 0433 98 11 16. Is Trent Cotchin in Richmond's best 22, Gerard?
Oh, look, I wouldn't know. Richmond supporters would know far better than me. I would say yes, but is he in their starting midfield? I'd say probably no. And that's why they're looking to trial him as a forward from all reports.
So let's have a listen to his teammate Jack Revolt speaking about the Cotchin forward experiment on Channel 7.
Yeah, Trent Coleman. No, he's been playing forward a little bit. For a player like him to add another string to his bow and play forward is important for us. I don't know what sort of nickname he'll have this year, but Trent Coleman's got a bit of a ring to it. A few of the boys are ribbing him about it, but he might have kicked 3 or 4 in a pracky game the other day.
So I'll give you my thoughts on it. If he's not in the centre bounce, in the phone box where he does his best work, and you know what I mean by that, when he's diving on boots, when he's tackling, when he's winning clearance, when he's pushing the ball forward, I don't think if he's not playing that role, he's in Richmond's best 22. He's kicked 16 goals in the last 5 seasons, Trent Cotchin.
Yeah, but he hasn't had the role that he's obviously going to be trialled at, and it'll be a multi-faceted role. It'll be a pressure role, I reckon. I can see him coming out of the goal square as a leading player. He's a very talented midfielder, and we've seen a lot of midfielders go forward in the last few years of their career and do particularly well.
I give it 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I give the experiment 2 weeks. It's like Geelong saying last year, we're going to turn Joel Seld into a forward. It just wouldn't work. It is the toughest position to play. The athleticism required. I might ask Jeremy Howell about that and what is required as the best forwards that he plays on. It's an unrealistic expectation, I think, for a player who's going to be 33, 34 by round 1 this year with the injury issues that he's had and the speed and the dynamic nature of that role. I don't know. Tigers fans, I had my say on Twitter and a couple of you had a crack at me, but you're more than willing to jump on and defend him